What's going on, everybody? It's Conti here with another video. How to create a game based loosely on the card game concentration, also known as matchup, in a command line interface using Python 3.7.4. The concentration card game involves the player picking a card from a set which are laid face down on a surface and flipping to face up each turn. The objective for the player is to turn over all pairs of matching cards. Once a player flips over one card, the subsequent card that they flip over must match that from the previous turn. This game doesn't comprise of any graphics, it all consists of text, numbers and symbols in its interface. At the start of the game, a welcome sign is displayed above the instructions explaining how the game is played. Any two cards on the table can be flipped over by choosing a column number and row number. If two mismatches are made, the player's lives are all used up and it's game over. First of all, on my Python console inside the repl.it window, I'm going to type in column 1 as my choice. Press enter after you've typed your number, followed by the row choice. I'm also going to type in 1 as my row choice, so I go for the card in the top left corner of my display table. So the first card is flipped from back to front, revealing the letter B. What we need to do now in the 5 remaining slots is identify another B to make a match. Should a mismatch be made, the console will instruct the player to choose another card from the remaining slots without revealing the incorrectly chosen card. I'm going to go for column 1 again, and this time row 2. No match has been made and we have 1 life remaining. For my second choice of a slot to find the second B card, I'm going to go into column 2 and choose row 2. Luckily this card is a B and we have the match with 4 slots remaining. For my second pair, I'm going to start off in column 2, row 1. The letter A is revealed. I'm going to go down to column 1 and row 2. Unfortunately, I've not located another A, and because of that, all my lives are used. Your 2 lives are used up, game over. So how do we get this game to work using code using Python 3.7.4? At the start of my program on line 1, I've written the command import random. The random function will be used to randomly allocate letters to a table so that the game is different each time. When the user has to locate a card, the positions of A, B and C cards are always different each time the player clicks to run the game. In order to create the table where the cards are laid out and from what the user selects a column and row from, we are going to be using object-oriented programming. I've created a class called table, and on my next line down we have defined which variables a table will consist of. Please bear in mind in this tutorial you can see grey lines appearing from the start of certain lines, and this will indicate how many spaces you need to indent your code by. So for example on line 4 here before def, you can see that there are 2 space slots between the start of the text and the left side of the page. If your line of code was right against the left side of the page, I will press space twice here to indent. Alternatively, what you can do is press the tab key on your keyboard once, and that automatically does 2 space slots for you. Should you see a second line, like you do with line 5 here for example, this will indicate that the line of code has been indented 4 times, or with the tab key pressed twice as an alternative. Please ensure that you utilize the same indentations in your work, otherwise certain functions may not be able to run in your game. Note how when there's a colon used on one line of code, there is an added indentation on the next line down, which is also used in subsequent instructions, depending on whether they're supposed to be part of the same defined function. Width and length determine how big the table will be for our concentration game. Self is used to refer to a particular table that we want to create. So for example, in my game, My particular table has 3 columns and 2 rows. Another programmer may decide to create a separate table which has 5 columns and 6 rows. These lines of code determine what each and every table that you create in the Python language with this particular source code will consist of. The width, the length, the front side of the card and the rear side of the card. The front side of the card, which is what we saw at the start of the game, were the question marks in each slot, obscuring what the actual card would be in terms of its letter. The rear side of the card represents the letter which will be displayed once the player has picked a card. In order for the table to be laid out appropriately as it is on screen, with 3 cards going across and 2 cards going up and down, as shown in my example table, we need to ensure that a set number of question marks are displayed in the same number of slots which make up the width. So if I were to define a table with a width of 3, for example, there should be 3 question marks, each one slotted in a particular data slot on the table, as demonstrated on the example game here. And in order to ensure that we don't just cover one particular row, the for I in range section at the end, which refers to the length, ensures that each row in the table is covered, so that 6 question marks are displayed all together before the player has taken a turn. Underneath class table, we have another function here for my class of table called display table. Note how I've included the word self in this particular set of parentheses here. This will ensure that any table I create with these instructions from lines 3 to 8 will be displayed to the player using the following instructions. At the top of the screen, above the columns and rows, we will display a set of numbers 1, 2 and 3, which label each of the column numbers that the player must choose from. And underneath this, we also need the row numbers printed, and therefore the variable j will help us do this. Once the number 1 is printed on the first row, the incrementation of j will ensure that the subsequent rows contain greater numbers. In this example here, the second row contains the number 2, after j was incremented from its initial value of 1. And to ensure that there is space between the table and the instructions for the player, a print instruction with a blank space which comprises of 2 sets of speech marks together with nothing in between is used on line 17 here. If I scroll down to my next instructions here, what needs to happen in order for the cards to be slotted in random locations on this table is that the deck needs to be created. In this particular game, since we have 6 slots altogether, there will be 3 matches in total. Therefore, I'm going to use 3 letters and times this by 2, so that I have 6 cards altogether. Each card will be appended to a variable called deck. What I does is it goes through this list, which basically comprises of ABC twice, so ABC, ABC. And with each of these letters, we will create a list, which is stored in the variable deck, and then using the random function, which we declared on line 1, this will be shuffled so that each time the player plays the game, the location of A, B and C will vary. On line 38, bear in mind I've used the letter A. This variable will store our table, which uses the instructions we wrote underneath the class table earlier on in my code. As mentioned before, each table will comprise of a width and length. Self refers to the table identifier, and in this case here, the table identifier is A, and the 3 refers to the width, and 2 refers to the length. 3 columns and 2 rows. Once the deck has been shuffled, each of the letters needs to be allocated to a particular position. In order for this to happen, X and Y coordinates are needed to go to particular parts of the table. Y basically represents the row number and X represents the column number. And bear in mind, these must be stored in the rear side, which the player cannot see at the start of the game. Using the X and Y coordinates, which are incremented after each loop here, we will go through the entire table and allocate 1 letter from the deck to the rear side of these laid down cards. What needs to happen when the program reaches the second row in each column is that it needs to go along to the next column. So once rows 1 and 2 have been given a letter card in column 1, the program needs to go to column 2 and start from row 1 there. If the program hasn't reached the bottom row, Y will be incremented and it will carry on until we get to the bottom row. In this particular card game, the number of lives that a player has is 2. No cards are revealed at the start of the game. A set of print instructions are displayed as the game is run to inform the player what to do. And of course, before the player makes any move, no matches of cards have been made, hence why there's a variable here called pairs, which equals 0. While true will basically execute the instructions below this command. Bear in mind indentations take place after this line of code on line 72 here in my program. In order for the program to prompt the player for a choice of column and row, column choice and row choice variables are set to irrelevant numbers, 0 and 0. As we can see on the grid, no column or row number equals 0, and therefore after the table is displayed using the instruction on line 75, again using the particular table identifier a while loop will run to ensure that the player enters a relevant column choice number, and this will keep on displaying until the user enters a relevant integer number as their input, 1 to 3. If it is greater than 3 or less than 1, the instruction will display again. So for example, if I type in 5 and press enter, the column choice is requested again until I enter a relevant choice. The same goes for row choice. Again, a blank space is displayed after the instruction is given. In Python, in order to refer to a particular part of a list, such as the first slot in row 1, which is under column 1, a particular number needs to be given to the program in order to reference this point. As a player for this game, I've typed in column 1 and row 1. However, in order for Python to identify this particular slot of the table, it needs to subtract 1 from the choices I've made from column and row in order to point to this particular spot. If it doesn't, what it will refer to is the next row and column along, which will be the second row slot underneath column 2, which is not what I selected as a player. So if I were to delete lines 81 and 82 and show how the game's played again, I'm going to type in 1 as my column choice and 1 as my row choice. Now you can see here that the card revealed is in the wrong place. This is because I've not subtracted 1 from the column or row choice as previously instructed on lines 81 and 82. Ensure that you have selected your source code again. On the right side of the screen here, press Ctrl and Z to undo a mistake. Use Command instead of Control if you're a Mac user. What needs to happen after a player has picked a particular card is that the question mark needs to disappear and the letter should be revealed so that the player identifies on screen here what they've selected and what letter they need to look for next. In order for this to happen, on line 83, the letter which was stored in the rear side of the particular card slot is then copied to the front side, which will be displayed when the whole table prints off again. Since the player has revealed a particular card letter, the variable revealed cards is incremented by 1. And this will enable the computer to record which character has been picked up first of all by the player, so that when the player picks their second card, a comparison can be made. After the player has picked 2 cards, using this if statement here, elif parallel with if, a comparison is made. If there is no match with the player's new choice and the previous card they picked, a message will be displayed to say that there is no match. The \n creates a space underneath the line of code on the console. As we can see here in the comments that I have on line 89, we don't want to reveal the second card chosen by the player if no match was made. And then therefore the number of cards that the user has picked or revealed goes back down to 1, and a question mark is displayed on the slot where the second card was. Only the initial selected card remains on screen but the number of lives goes down and a live count reminder is displayed to the player. If there is a match, a pair is made and the revealed cards variable goes back down to 0. Should a mismatch be made twice and the number of lives is 0, bear in mind 2 equal symbols are used here on this if line. The player is informed that the game is over, and break is used to stop the while loop from running and enabling the player to take another turn. The same applies if the player has found all 3 pairs, the final table with all 3 matches appearing on the console, and a message displayed underneath informing that the player has won. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that video was useful to you. If you enjoyed the video and wish to be notified about future uploads on this channel, please like and subscribe. Join me soon for another video. Take care.